to the last day. People may choose to do one or do the other. Now, there are also differences, which people may think are differences amongst what they may quote-unquote call the sects in Islam, which are in fact really cultural differences. They have to do with people's cultural practices and really have nothing to do with Islam. But due to the fact that in ignorance people are no longer able to distinguish between what is actually Islamic practice and what is cultural practice, it all gets mixed up together and people think it's all Islam. Because we're Muslims and we're doing it, it must be a part of Islam. But that's not necessarily the case. There are many practices found in the Muslim world today which have nothing to do with Islam at all. In fact, many of these practices are a source of creating a very negative image about Islam and about Muslims. And it is very important for us to be able to distinguish between these, to know what in fact is Islamic teachings and what in fact are cultural practices which may or may not be acceptable Islamically. Now, where we hear of sects where we have what is maybe referred to as Shiite Islam and Sunni Islam, this is the major apparent sectarian difference. We have to understand that what is referred to as Sunni Islam, or Islam based on the Sunnah, following the way of the Sunnah of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, that represents 85% of the Muslim world. The remaining 15% that consider themselves to be Muslims, but they could call themselves Shiite Muslims, they represent a schism, a group that has broken away from the mainstream teachings of Islam. And any organization, any group, all of the religions of the past, you'll find there are groups that will splinter off. So this is not a new phenomenon. But the point is that this splinter group does not represent the majority, or cannot really compete with the majority in terms of the numbers of people, so we can say like it's 50-50, so we don't know who, as in the case, for example, of Christianity, where Protestants and Catholics are split around 50-50. So who is to say who is right? In the case, if we were to look in terms of numbers, in the case of what is referred to as Sunni Islam, they represent the vast majority of Muslims. 85 of the close to a billion plus Muslims, they represent 85% of Muslims. And they represent Islam really as it was conveyed by the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, practices which are attributable back to him. What the Shiites have are practices which are outside of those practices, things which have been brought in, innovated, changed, after the time of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him. So, in answer to Raja Gul's question, we would say, clarifying for others who wonder why are there sects, that what may be perceived as sects are not really sects at all. The 4 schools of Islamic law are not sects of Islam. I hear people referring to them as sects, but they're not sects. The Hanafi sect, no. This is one Islam. This is just legal differences in terms of application of law. And when one speaks of sects from a perspective of Shiite Islam, we say there's no such thing really as Shiite Islam. There is Islam, which is what is followed by the main body of Muslims, and then there's Shiaism, which is an offshoot, or a breakaway group from mainstream Islam. The second question, which we'd like to entertain today, is one from Dubai, from Mr. Mir. He writes, Dear Dr. Abu Ameena Bilal Phillips, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wishing you all the best in life. I have a question for your program, and I hope that a detailed answer is given by you, so that no doubts remain after I listen to you on television. The question is about music in Islam. Music, that is singing and instrumental, is prohibited in Islam. And there are a lot of other things prohibited to us, such as interest, theft, wine drinking, gambling, eating haram, etc. these prohibited things, with the exception of music, are by and large avoided by most Muslims. Music, I've found, is the only prohibited one which is being observed by all, or 99.99% of Muslims. They're involved in music, which may be singing, playing instruments, they're listening, etc. So much so that their religious songs are also available, like Humud and Nast, I guess. Music in Islamic programs, stage, radio, television is used in both private and government organizations, etc., even in Muslim countries. I want to know why this satanic act is so popular and goes unrestricted throughout our world, in Muslim communities throughout all the ages and from all the peers. Is there any miscommunication in hadith or misinterpretation? Mushtaq, Mr. Mushtaq here. The issue concerning music, as you mentioned, it is an issue which perhaps is most neglected in the Muslim communities, that though most of the other things which are well known are prohibited, people don't do it. In general, you still, of course, in particular, you may find people drinking, people gambling, etc., who call themselves Muslims. But in general, in the Muslim world, you find Muslims in general avoid these things. But music seems to be infused in the cultures of Muslim peoples. Well, was it for all times? Well, no. We know that actually there's an aspect of music which Islam sanctioned. Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, sanctioned the use of the voice, that males and females may sing. However, he put some restrictions on singing, that for women to sing and to be listened by males, adult males, it should be women who are who haven't reached puberty. They're, in other words, small girls, small children. Listening to their singing, etc., no problem. However, listening to the singing of adult women, and this is adult women who we may marry. Of course, if your wife wants to sing to you, or your mother wants to sing to you, or your daughter wants to sing to you, or your sister, who are adults, there's no problem in listening to it. But listening to a woman who is outside of these bounds where marriage is prohibited, then for males it is forbidden for them to listen to the voice of females singing, for the danger that comes from them being attracted and sexual feelings being aroused in the society, being fanned, the flame being fanned in the society. Islam tries to keep this at a minimum, to minimize, the sexuality or the awareness of sex in the society, keep it down. Because ultimately of the harm which comes to women and children who suffer from these types of relationships which are outside of the bounds of marriage, etc., etc. Also, in the recitation of Quran, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said that whoever does not sing the Quran, that is to recite it in a melodious voice, is not of us. So there is within this framework of singing that which is permissible. And in terms of instruments, the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, had instructed the people of Medina that when they were having their wedding feast, etc., that they should beat the duff, which is like a hand drum. They could use this along with their celebrations for singing, etc., etc. So the use of the duff is being permitted, the hand drum. Now, beyond that, we have the Prophet informing us in Sahih al-Bukhari that among the signs of the last day would be that people would make permissible, or halal, the wind and stringed instruments. So we know that the use of the guitar and piano, saxophone, and these type of instruments are forbidden. But unfortunately, they have become very popular in the Muslim world today. We know that in Spain, there was a promotion of music, so much so that, as I've come to understand, that even the guitar was invented there, and the writing of musical notes was invented there amongst Muslims. This was based partly on a ruling made by one of the scholars of Spain, Ibn Hazm, who ruled that none of the traditions of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, which prohibited music, were authentic. However, he was incorrect in this ruling. But as a result of that ruling, this opened the door for the promotion of music in that part of the Muslim world. And it spread from there, and it, you can find it from one end of the Muslim community to the other, in different parts of the Muslim world. But the fact of the matter is that there are sufficient authentic traditions which prohibit its use. And Muslims should beware of it. Perhaps in future programs we could look more into the harm and why it is that Islam has prohibited it, which is something which is so appealing, something so pleasurable. People take pleasure from it. It doesn't seem to cause harm. Where is the harm? And perhaps in some of the future programs we'll have a chance to look at those issues more, but enough to say that it is prohibited, and because of people's ignorance, it seems to be well rooted in Muslim communities from one end of the world to the other. Now, with that, dear viewers, I'd like to thank you for being with us in this segment of our program, In the Light of Islam. And we hope that you'll continue to follow the program in the coming weeks. And if you have any questions, and we encourage you all to write in, you may write to me, Dr. Bilal Phillips, In the Light of Islam, Sharjah Television, P.O. Box 111, Sharjah. And with that, dear viewers, I'd like to bid you all farewell. Thank you for being with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.